When it comes to winning luxury listing presentations, there's 5 things that you need to be mindful of, and I'm going to walk through all of them. So whether you're a new agent getting your first crack at a luxury listing, or you're an experienced agent and haven't quite done any yet, I'm going to explain what you could do in order to win it. Because as a 24-year-old new agent in a new city who didn't really know many people, I won a $4.1 million listing over one of the most experienced listing agents in my market that basically dominated that entire area where this listing was held, doing what I'm going to explain. I'm also going to explain the story behind it so that you can get a reference point as to how you can properly prepare so that next time you get an opportunity to go up for $1 million listing, you're the one that comes out on top. All right, so let's start this off with the story behind this listing presentation. And so it was me going up against one of the most experienced listing agents in my entire market who was at the big luxury brokerage. Everybody knew who he was, signs everywhere, and he was absolutely crushing it in the area where this beautiful listing was located. And it was really interesting because before going into the listing presentation, I actually remember recording an Instagram story. And on that Instagram story, I was kind of parked about 1 kilometer away from the property, and I just flicked my camera on my phone and kind of explained to the fact that, hey, I'm going into this listing presentation. It's a monster of a house, absolutely stunning. And I'm going up against the top guy. Might win, might not, but I'm going to do my best. And that level of vulnerability actually ended up being my most engaged Instagram story of that entire year. So that was just a bit of a side note. And it's really important to show those sides of things where you don't go in and say, I'm guaranteed to win, but more like, hey, I'm going to do my best. I'll let you guys know either which way. Thankfully, I did come out on top. But this was a gorgeous home. And again, I didn't have any experience with multi-million-dollar properties up to this point. So I really wanted to position myself to do the best. And this is the case for many people that are kind of entering that luxury space where they get that first listing and they're a little bit overwhelmed. They don't really know what to do. And they're getting a bit nervous and anxious as to whether or not they can deliver. So let me explain to you what you need to do when you go up against maybe a more experienced listing agent that's on the luxury side, or maybe you're the only one that's getting interviewed for the listing, but you want to make sure you do it the right way. So the first thing that I want to explain here, and I've got a couple notes that I'm going to share over here, is that I came prepared, not just with a listing presentation, which is an obvious, but I came prepared physically and mentally. And so I want to unpack all 3 of those. Now, when it came to the presentation, part number 3 is actually going to be the most important part because I'm going to get into the questions that you need to ask. But coming in with the presentation is going to be important, but don't overthink it because so many people think that you need this unbelievable presentation. Mine was on a laptop that I did on PowerPoint, and it was pretty much the same presentation that I've done in terms of the look and the feel and everything of every listing that I had. But it did have information there about what differentiated myself from other agents, and especially leaning into the marketing side and the advertising side of leveraging Facebook ads to get more exposure, also being able to do a really high quality video for my YouTube channel, exposing it on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms as well. But the presentation is kind of a non-negotiable. And so, yes, you need to have a presentation. Yes, it needs to talk about the power of your brokerage, amplification of the value that you have, and what you're going to do above and beyond other agents. So we don't really need to get too far into that. If you do have questions about that, drop them below and I will personally respond to them so that you do get your answers. But the more important thing was showing up physically and mentally prepared. Physically prepared is I treated this like a luxury listing. And so I wore a suit. I showed up professionally. I just got a fresh haircut and I showed up ready to present myself at the highest capacity that I could. And so it's important to understand that, especially knowing that I was a younger agent, you need to, again, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. If you're usually dealing in the average price point of your market and you're trying to go up against a 2, 3, or in my case, $4 million listing, you need to understand that most people that have these properties work their entire life to get to that point. And they want somebody that looks the part. So typically back then I was wearing polos and dress pants or polos and jeans because I did a lot of also average price point properties. But with the luxury properties, I always wore a suit. Mentally prepared is really important as well. Going in and not treating this like you're desperate, not treating this like this is the be all end all of your career, make or break, because This is where it comes down to home runs versus hitting singles. A lot of agents think that if they just get this one luxury listing, it's going to catapult their business forever. It's not. It can be a great thing to leverage to get a more exposure into that space and get more, but it's not going to be the be-all end-all of your career. So don't put that pressure on yourself mentally, like if you don't get this listing, if you don't win this listing presentation, everything is going to collapse and you're going to go broke. That's not the case. So you have to treat it properly. Now, part 2 is a really important one. Part number 2 is that I partnered with a more experienced agent. And so I got the listing presentation. It was my lead. I converted it. I got the ball teed up for the listing presentation. But I also understood that I was 24 years old. I didn't have much experience. I just had a lot of drive, and I was doing things creatively on social media that a lot of people wanted back at that time because not many people were doing it. So having the humility to say, I really do want to win this, but I also know that I don't carry even a fraction of the experience of the agent that I'm going up against. What I did is I partnered with my old broker, who is, and still is one of my best friends. And we decided to do it together. And so where I'm going with this is that my mentality going in, again, going mentally prepared, I would rather get 50% of the commission and get that opportunity to leverage it to get more business and break into the luxury space than to get 100% of the commission, be greedy, and try and have the ego to just say, well, I'm going to take it on myself. I would rather hedge my bets and bring in somebody like my past broker that had 15 years experience as a top 1% agent with luxury listings and be able to tag team it together where he brought the experience, I brought the boots on the ground, the marketing, the advertising, the social, the innovation that everybody wanted, but he brought the experience, the database, the relationships, the extensive sphere of high net worth clients. And so it's one of those conversations that you need to have internally and say, would you rather win the listing or would you rather have the pride to say that you did it yourself? And for me, I wanted to win the listing. And that relationship with me and my past broker went on to end up leading to us doing multiple multi-million-dollar listings together because it just worked so well. We complemented each other, but we won pretty much every single time, because we're able to bring two different things to the table, both of which were highly in demand, and very few agents in my market center were able to do both. And so I encourage you to consider that when you're going up for your next $1 million listing. Is there an agent, whether it be at your brokerage or at a different brokerage, but one that you trust, one that you enjoy working with, one that has credibility, and is going to be able to bring and fill in the gaps that you have to complement, again, what you're able to bring to the table. Now, number 3, again, talking about this being the most important part, is the questions. And so a lot of people, when they're preparing for a luxury listing, they create this unbelievable presentation, which is good. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I did have a great presentation with all the comparables and all the data and all the information. It looked incredible, but too many people think that's where the road stops. And so what happens is you're making assumptions as to what you think the seller cares about, and you tailor your presentation toward that. And sometimes you miss the mark. And the reason being is because so many people go into this listing presentation because of that kind of anxiety and that desperation to win it. And they just flood their presentation with statements. They sit down with the seller at the kitchen table, which is usually what you want to do, or on the couch, somewhere casual in the living room. And they just go full tilt. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm the best at. Here's what nobody else does. And they just start pounding statements and information into the seller. But what you'll realize is statements don't control conversations. Questions control conversations. You want to be in control of the conversation. And so before going through any of the listing presentation, me and my past broker sat down on the couches that were in the basement and in the living room down there, and we just started asking questions. Why are you looking to sell? What didn't go well because it was previously listed with another agent and it didn't sell? What didn't go well with that past relationship? Why do you think it didn't sell? What are your expectations of us? Why did you decide to interview us? Questions like that. And the reason being is because you're able to find out a couple key pieces of information, which is you're able to identify the client's motivation as to why they're looking to make the move. So that gives you an opportunity to better position the pricing, right? And better justify the pricing when you're talking about the comparables. Based on that style of property and based on the market back then, homes in the comparable region were selling in like hundreds of days for hundreds of thousands under list price. And so if you identified that they want to be out of here in like the next quarter, the next 3 months, the next month, well, the price has to reflect that. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't ask the question about their timeline, about why they're making the move. And I'll explain why this is so important psychologically in a second here. But then you also get to identify what is their personality type. The client that we ended up working with was very data-driven, very analytical, engineer similar to myself and to my past broker, and we're able to connect on that level. But knowing that he's very data-driven, you better believe every single week we gave a data-driven update to that client in the way that we knew he wanted to be communicated with. We were also able to identify very unique aspects of the property through those qualifying questions that the previous agents never highlighted in any sort of content, in any sort of listing description or information associated with the property. And so that gave us a better position. And so what I encourage you to do is when you're going into these high-end listing presentations, start off with questions. Get to know the client, their personality type, so you understand the type of person you're working with. See, at the end of the day, what I was going to refer to here, and I said I would explain in a moment, is that the number one thing humans crave is significance. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel special. They want to feel acknowledged and appreciated. And when you go in and you start hammering out this listing presentation, and then you get to the end and you're like, so what do you think? Well, that doesn't show that you think that the seller's significant. That's making it all about you. But you all know the acronym, what's in it for me? That's what the sellers actually care about. And we got to the end of the listing presentation after we had those questions, which then allowed us to open up our listing presentation on the laptop and tailor the entirety of it to what we now knew he cared about. And so it gives you more leverage with the listing presentation because of the fact that you now have all the ammunition. You basically ask questions, which loads you up with ammunition, and then you loop everything back in your listing presentation with a sales loop to tailor everything in your listing presentation to exactly what they care about. So they get to the end and they're like, well, it's almost like you knew what I wanted. Well, yes, that's why we asked very strategic questions in the beginning. And that's where it comes down to proper sales and be able to relate to people, understanding the 6 basic human needs, right? I've got a full video. If you want it, just drop a comment below and say listing presentation video where I walk through the 6 basic human needs that people crave, whether it be significance or any of the other 6. This is going to position you. So we got to the end of that listing presentation and the seller was saying, well, I've never had a conversation like that with any other agent. Nobody asked me what I wanted. Nobody asked me about the unique features of my home. Nobody asked me about all of these different things. And nobody was able to give that data-driven response that you guys were. Well, that's all by design. And you can design these conversations for you to win if you just go ahead and be prepared ahead of time. Now, number 4 is a bit of an interesting one, and you may be able to do this sometimes, you may not be able to do this sometimes, but I asked the seller, who is the other agent we're going up against? And he was willing to tell us. And so if you do have the luxury of knowing who you're going up against, do some research. Now, we are all in this industry together. It's unfortunate that there's so many people in this industry that are overly aggressive, overly competitive, talk negatively about other agents, and it's a huge problem in my opinion. And I've talked about this in other videos about, the fact that so many people try and tear others down or talk negatively about them. Never talk negatively ever about another agent in any capacity, but especially not a listing presentation. And so where I'm going with point number 4 is do some research about the other agent that you know you're going up against if you're privy to that information, so that again, you can understand where they fall short and kind of take the conversation and harp on that a little bit more if that's one of your strengths. So I knew that this agent was not strong at social media. He didn't have a presence on YouTube. He wasn't leveraging modern strategies. He was very traditional. And so I never brought up his name in the listing presentation. I never said, oh, the other guy that you're interviewing doesn't do this. I just spent more time talking about that. And also very strategically said, by the way, when you interview any other agents, I encourage you to ask them, do they do this? Do they do that? Do they do the other thing? That were all my strengths when it came to social media. So again, I encourage you, even if you know the agents you're going up against, never speak their name unless it's positively, never talk negatively, never talk down, never compare yourself to them, but find out as much information as you can, because that gives you more ammunition to better position yourself in the listing presentation by spending a bit more time talking about different things that you're very well aware are not their strengths, but they are yours. And lastly, we kind of talked about it, but not being desperate. And that's a really important one, because I find when you get an opportunity to get such a big listing, again, 4.1 million, the commission from that, life-changing for me at that age, in that stage of my career as well. And so I understand that it's very easy and natural to put a lot of pressure on yourself. But when you do that, you have to understand that that's going to come across in your body language, in your tonality. It's going to come across in your follow-up. You're going to follow up a bit too quickly, or you're going to kind of look for answers and you're going to jump to the gun. And so I encourage you to take the mindset of understanding that, again, if you win this, it's going to be incredible. You win either way. And the reason being is that you win big if you win the listing. You also win if you lose the listing, because you can follow up with the seller and ask them, hey, congrats on finding the right agent that's the best fit for you. I know they're a great individual, man or woman, and I really hope that it works out for you. Hey, just curious, I'd really like to know why you decided to choose them over me, just so that I can get better and improve my business. The reason why you win if you lose a listing is because it's going to give you insight as to what you can do better next time so that you don't lose. There's no losing if you decide to associate the right meaning with any situation and understand the concept that life happens for you, not to you, right? When one door shuts, usually one or two bigger ones opens. And if you just treat every experience, if you lose a listing, that it was a learning experience, you can't lose. You're always winning in some way, shape, or form. It might not just be directly. And so I encourage you to not go into any listing presentation in a desperate fashion, and to just understand that all you can do is your best. All you can do is prepare ahead of time to the fullest capacity that you're capable of, and go in there and bring value and show up with energy, ask the right questions, and know with confidence internally that if you do get the listing, that you're going to do everything humanly possible to go above and beyond anybody else to get it sold. But if you don't win the listing, that's okay. And again, everything happens for a reason, whether you win or don't get the listing. And you can turn every single situation into a learning and a winning experience that's going to help you win twice as much down the road. So if you have your first listing, your first $1 million listing, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Or if you have any questions about winning $1 million listings, again, just comment below. I'm here for my community. I love when you guys engage, and I want to see you guys win and actually win the listing. But if you don't, hopefully you're able to learn something from it. So when you get the next at bat for that big $1 million listing in that big mansion, that you're the one that comes out on top. So again, if you got any value from this, please just smash the like button, because it encouraged me to say, hey, maybe you want more luxury content. I'm more than happy to give it to you if I get a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't. So again, hopefully I see you in the comments. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video.